The stars above Thessara Prime had always been beautiful. For thousands of years, the Valorian people had looked up at the night sky and dreamed of the wonders that waited among those distant lights. They had built ships. They had explored. They had met other species and formed friendships that spanned across the darkness of space. The Valorian coalition was their greatest achievement. 7 different species working together, sharing knowledge, protecting each other from the dangers of the universe. But tonight, those same stars were hidden behind fire and smoke. Admiral Zintara stood at the center of the command platform, his 4 arms gripping the railing so tightly that his blue skin had turned pale. His large, dark eyes reflected the horror unfolding on the massive view screen before him. Ships were dying. His ships. His people. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. The HFY had come without warning. 300 warships had dropped out of hyperspace just 2 hours ago, and in that short time, they had already destroyed more than half of the coalition defense fleet. The HFY were known throughout the galaxy as conquerors. They did not negotiate. They did not accept surrender. They simply erased entire civilizations from existence and took whatever they wanted from the ashes. "Admiral, the Starfall has been destroyed," reported Commander Lyra from her station. Her voice was steady, but Zintara could see the fear in her eyes. She was young for her rank, barely 40 cycles old, but she had proven herself in smaller conflicts. Nothing, however, could have prepared her for this. "The Crimson Wing is reporting critical damage. They are requesting permission to retreat." "Granted," Zintara said quietly. "Tell all ships to fall back to defensive position 7. We need to protect the evacuation transports." He knew it was pointless. The evacuation had started too late. There were 12 billion people on Thessara Prime, and they had managed to load perhaps a few 100,000 onto transport ships. Even if those ships escaped, it would be a tiny fraction of his people. The rest would die when the HFY finished with the fleet and turned their weapons on the planet below. On the view screen, another coalition ship exploded in a ball of orange fire. The vessel had been the Horizon's Light, a science vessel that had been pressed into combat duty when the attack began. It had no weapons worth mentioning. Its crew of 200 had volunteered to fly it into battle anyway, hoping to distract the enemy for just a few more minutes. They had lasted less than 30 seconds. "Why?" Zintara whispered to himself. "Why did they come here?" The answer was simple, and he knew it. The HFY did not need a reason. They conquered because conquering was what they did. The Valorian coalition had resources, technology, and habitable worlds. That was enough. The HFY would strip this system bare and then move on to the next, leaving nothing but empty rocks and silence behind. Commander Lyra approached him slowly. "Admiral, I have sent distress signals on every frequency we have. I have contacted every species we know, every government, every independent faction. No one is responding." "They are afraid," Zintara said bitterly. "They know that if they help us, the HFY will come for them next. So they hide and hope the Dominion will be satisfied with our blood." It was the great tragedy of the galaxy. Everyone knew the HFY were a threat. Everyone agreed that something should be done, but no one was willing to be the first to stand against them. And so the Dominion grew stronger with each conquest, feeding on the fear of those who watched from the safety of their distant worlds. "There must be someone," Lyra said desperately. "There must be something we can do." Zintara looked at her with tired eyes. He had lived for over 200 cycles. He had seen wars before. He had lost friends and family to violence and tragedy. But he had always believed that somehow things would work out, that the universe, despite all its cruelty, had some sense of justice hidden within it. He no longer believed that. "Prepare the evacuation of this station," he ordered. "We will transfer command to the secondary facility on the fourth moon. It will not save us, but it will give us a few more hours." Lyra nodded and turned to relay the orders. Around them, officers worked frantically at their stations, trying to coordinate what remained of the defense fleet. Alarms blared constantly. Reports of destruction came in every few seconds. The HFY were not even trying hard. They were taking their time, enjoying the slaughter, savoring the fear of their victims. Then something strange happened. One of the censor officers, a young Valorian named Teth, suddenly sat up straight in his chair. His eyes went wide as he stared at his display. "Admiral," he said slowly, his voice confused. "I am detecting a hyperspace signature at the edge of the system." Zintara felt a flicker of hope in his chest, followed immediately by suspicion. "More HFY reinforcements?" "No, sir. The signature is different. I have never seen an energy pattern like this before." Teth worked his controls rapidly, trying to make sense of the data. "It is a single vessel, small, roughly the size of one of our cruisers. No identification signal. No known configuration in our database." "Put it on screen." The view screen shifted, zooming in on the distant point of light, where the new ship had appeared. What Zintara saw made no sense to him. The vessel was angular and sharp, with harsh lines that seemed designed for aggression. Its hull was completely black, so dark that it seemed to absorb the light of the stars around it. Strange energy patterns flickered across its surface like lightning trapped beneath metal skin. "What is that?" Commander Lyra whispered. "I do not know," Zintara admitted. "Hail them. Find out who they are and what they want." Lyra moved to the communications station and opened a channel. "Unknown vessel. This is Commander Lyra of the Valorian Coalition. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. Be advised that this system is currently under attack by hostile forces. If you are not here to fight, we strongly recommend you leave immediately." There was a long pause. Static crackled over the speakers. Then a voice came through, calm, steady, and speaking perfect Valorian through what had to be an incredibly advanced translation system. "This is Captain Marcus Cole of the United Earth vessel Ironclad. We received your distress signal. What is your situation?" Zintara stepped forward, his heart pounding. He had never heard of Earth. He had never encountered these humans before. But right now, they were the only ones who had answered the call. "Captain Cole," he said urgently, "we are facing an invasion force of over 300 HFY warships. Our fleet has been nearly destroyed. Billions of lives are at stake. Have you brought reinforcements? Is help coming?" Another pause. Then the human's voice returned, as calm as before. "Negative, Admiral. It is just us." Zintara felt his hope collapse into despair. One ship. One small ship had come to answer their desperate plea for help. It was brave, certainly, perhaps even noble, but it was also completely useless. They were all going to die. Admiral Zintara stared at the communication screen in disbelief. He had asked for help from the entire galaxy. He had begged every known species to come to their aid. And the only response had been a single small ship, crewed by a species he had never even heard of. "Captain Cole," he said carefully, trying to keep the despair out of his voice, "I appreciate your willingness to help, but you must understand the situation. The HFY have 300 warships. Our entire defense fleet has been reduced to less than 40 vessels, most of which are badly damaged. One ship, no matter how brave its crew, cannot make a difference here." There was silence from the other end of the channel. Then the human spoke again, his voice completely calm. "Admiral, I understand your concern, but I need you to trust me. Order your remaining ships to fall back to a minimum safe distance from the combat zone. This area is about to become very hostile. Commander Lyra looked at Zintara with confusion written across her face. Admiral, is he serious? Does he actually believe he can fight the entire HFY fleet alone? I do not know what he believes, Zintara replied quietly. He turned back to the communication screen. Captain Cole, I cannot in good conscience allow you to throw your life away in a meaningless gesture. Whatever species you are, whatever world you come from, your people deserve to have you return home safely. Please, save yourself while you still can. The human's response came after a brief pause. Admiral, my people have a saying. We do not start fights, but we finish them. I came here to help, and I intend to do exactly that. Now please, pull your ships back. I would hate for any of your people to get caught in the crossfire. Zintara did not know what to say. He looked at the sensor display, watching the tiny dot that represented the human vessel. It was already moving forward, accelerating toward the massive HFY armada at a speed that seemed impossible for a ship of that size. Either these humans were completely insane, or they knew something that the rest of the galaxy did not. All ships, Zintara ordered slowly, fall back to position 12. Maintain sensor contact, but do not engage the enemy. Admiral, Commander Lyra's voice was uncertain. Are we really going to let one ship face the HFY alone? We have no choice, Zintara replied. Our fleet is broken. We cannot fight anymore. If this human wants to sacrifice himself, I cannot stop him. But perhaps his death will buy us a few more minutes to evacuate civilians. He did not believe his own words. The HFY would destroy the human ship in seconds, and then they would continue their assault as if nothing had happened. But something in the human captain's voice had been strange. There had been no fear in it. No desperation, just calm, quiet confidence, like a person who knew exactly what they were doing. On the other side of the battlefield, aboard the HFY flagship Devastation, Supreme Commander Vorthax received reports about the new arrival. He was a massive creature, nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin, covered in battle scars, and 4 powerful arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. He had conquered 47 worlds in his career. He had killed millions of sentient beings with his own hands. Fear was something that happened to other people. A single vessel? He growled, his voice like grinding stones. What species? His sensor officer consulted the data. Unknown configuration, Supreme Commander. The translation of their communication suggests they call themselves humans, from a planet called Earth. We have no records of this species in our database. Vorthax made a sound that might have been a laugh. A young species, then. Primitive. Foolish enough to think they can challenge the Dominion. He waved one of his massive hands dismissively. Send the Claw of Darkness to destroy them. I do not wish to waste my time on insects. The Claw of Darkness was a destroyer-class vessel, crewed by 300 HFY warriors. It broke formation and moved to intercept the approaching human ship. Its captain was an experienced officer named Torveth, who had destroyed countless enemy vessels in his career. He expected this engagement to be the easiest kill of his life. On the bridge of the ironclad, Captain Marcus Cole watched the approaching destroyer with steady eyes. He was a tall man in his 40s, with short gray hair and a face that had seen too many battles. Behind him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency at their stations. Single destroyer moving to intercept, reported Lieutenant Amy Graves from the tactical station. She was young, barely 30, but she had the sharp eyes and quick mind of a natural warrior. Weapons range in 40 seconds. Understood, Cole replied calmly. Charge the main battery. Target their reactor core. Chief Engineer Derek Santos called out from the engineering station. Reactor output at 100%, Captain. All systems nominal. We are ready. Cole nodded slightly. On my mark. The Claw of Darkness opened fire first. A massive blast of superheated plasma shot across space toward the ironclad, powerful enough to melt through the hull of any coalition ship. It struck the human vessel directly. Nothing happened. The plasma dispersed harmlessly against the ironclad's shields. The energy absorbed and dissipated as if it had been nothing more than a gentle breeze. On the HFY destroyer, Captain Torveth stared at his sensors in confusion. That shot should have crippled the enemy ship. Instead, it had not even slowed down. Fire again, he ordered. All weapons! The Claw of Darkness unleashed everything it had. Plasma cannons, missile batteries, energy beams, a storm of destruction that would have overwhelmed a coalition battleship. The ironclad flew straight through it without flinching, its shields glowing faintly as they absorbed the punishment. They are still coming, Torveth's weapons officer reported, his voice trembling. No damage detected. How is this possible? On the ironclad's bridge, Captain Cole's expression did not change. Lieutenant Graves, fire! Amy Graves pressed a single button. A beam of pure white energy lanced out from the ironclad's forward weapons array. It crossed the distance between the two ships in less than a heartbeat and struck the Claw of Darkness directly in the center of its hull. The HFY destroyer did not explode. It did not break apart. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive warship crewed by 300 warriors. The next moment, there was nothing but a cloud of expanding particles, glowing faintly as they dispersed into the void. Total time from first shot to destruction, 4 seconds. On the Valorian command station, Admiral Zintara watched in stunned silence. Commander Lyra had stopped breathing entirely. Every officer on the platform stood frozen, staring at the empty space where the HFY destroyer had been. What? Zintara whispered. What did they just do? He had never seen a weapon like that. No one in the coalition had ever seen a weapon like that. The HFY had the most powerful ships in the known galaxy, and this small human vessel had just erased one of them as casually as swatting an insect. On the devastation, Supreme Commander Vorthax was no longer laughing. For the first time in decades, something cold and unfamiliar crept into his chest. It felt like fear. Supreme Commander Vorthax had conquered 47 worlds. He had crushed rebellions, destroyed entire fleets, and personally killed more beings than he could count. In all that time, he had never felt uncertain about a battle. The HFY Dominion was the greatest military power in the galaxy. No one could stand against them. But what he had just witnessed made no sense. Report, he growled at his sensor officer. What happened to the Claw of Darkness? The officer's claws trembled as he studied his display. Complete destruction, Supreme Commander. The enemy weapon, it appears to have converted the entire mass of the ship into energy. Instantly. There was no time to react, no time to evade. One shot and the vessel was simply gone. Vorthax stared at the view screen where the human ship continued its approach. It was so small compared to his fleet, a tiny black shape among giants. Yet it moved with a confidence that unsettled him. Most enemies fled when they saw the HFY armada. This vessel was charging directly toward them. Send the 7th Assault Group, Vorthax ordered. 20 ships! Destroy that thing! 20 HFY warships broke formation and moved to intercept the ironclad. They were a mix of destroyers and cruisers, each one capable of devastating an entire planet. Together, they represented more firepower than most species possessed in their entire military. They spread out into an attack formation, weapons charging, ready to overwhelm the human ship from multiple angles. On the bridge of the ironclad, Ensign Katie Walsh tracked the approaching enemy vessels on her navigation console. She was the youngest member of the bridge crew, just 24 years old, but she had graduated at the top of her class from the United Earth Naval Academy. Her fingers moved across her controls with practiced ease. 20 hostiles inbound, Captain, she reported. Formation suggests they intend to surround us and fire from all directions simultaneously. Captain Cole nodded slightly. A reasonable tactic against most opponents. Lieutenant Graves, target priority? Amy Graves studied her tactical display, her mind working through calculations at lightning speed. Recommend we eliminate the cruisers first. They have heavier weapons and better shielding. The destroyers are dangerous, but less durable. Agreed. Chief Santos, how are we looking? Derek Santos checked his engineering readouts. All systems green, Captain. Reactor is humming like a dream. We can sustain full combat output for approximately 6 hours before we need to recharge. That should be more than enough, Cole said with a hint of dry humor. Ensign Walsh, evasive pattern Delta. Lieutenant Graves, you may fire at will. The ironclad surged forward, its engines pushing it to speeds that would have torn most ships apart. It dove into the center of the HFY formation like a wolf among sheep, twisting and spinning in ways that seemed to defy physics. The HFY ships opened fire. Hundreds of plasma bolts and missiles filled the space around the ironclad, creating a web of destruction that should have been impossible to escape. But the human ship was not where the weapons expected it to be. It moved too fast, changed direction too quickly, as if it knew exactly where every shot would go before it was fired. Target locked, Amy Graves announced. Firing! A beam of white energy sliced through the darkness and struck the nearest HFY cruiser. The massive ship shuddered, then broke apart in a cascade of explosions as its reactor went critical. Before the debris had even begun to scatter, the ironclad had already moved on, its weapons finding new targets. Another cruiser died, then another. The destroyers tried to close in, hoping to overwhelm the human ship at close range, but the ironclad's point defense systems were perfect. Missiles were intercepted and destroyed before they could get close. Energy beams were deflected by shields that seemed to have no upper limit. On the Valorian command platform, Admiral Zintara watched the battle unfold with a mixture of awe and terror. He had never seen anything like this. The human ship moved through the HFY formation like a dancer, graceful and deadly. Every shot it fired found its target. Every enemy attack missed or was absorbed harmlessly. "This is impossible," Commander Lyra breathed. "1 ship against 20, and they are winning. They are not just winning, they are dominating." The sensor officer, Teth, called out in amazement. "Admiral, I am reading the human vessel's energy output. It is... I do not understand these numbers. Their reactor is producing more power than our entire fleet combined." Zintara's mind raced. How was this possible? Humans were unknown to the coalition. They had no presence in galactic politics, no alliances, no trade relationships. They had appeared from nowhere, and they possessed technology that made the most advanced species in the galaxy look primitive. On the devastation, Vorthax watched his ships die one by one. The 7th Assault Group, 20 of his finest warships, was being systematically destroyed by a single enemy vessel. 14 ships were already gone. The remaining 6 were trying desperately to retreat, but the human ship was too fast. It caught them easily, its weapons carving through their hulls like claws through flesh. "All ships!" Vorthax roared into the fleet communication channel. "Focus fire on the human vessel. Every weapon, every ship. Destroy it now." The entire HFY armada turned its attention to the ironclad. Nearly 300 warships oriented their weapons toward the tiny black shape that had caused so much destruction. This was overwhelming force, the kind of firepower that could crack a planet's crust. No shield could withstand it. No ship could survive it. On the ironclad's bridge, warning alarms began to sound as sensors detected the massive power buildup from the enemy fleet. "Captain," Katie Walsh reported, her voice calm despite the situation. "The entire enemy fleet is targeting us. Estimated incoming fire, over 5,000 plasma cannons and approximately 2,000 missile launchers." Derek Santos looked up from his engineering station. "That is a lot of firepower, sir." "Can the shields handle it?" Cole asked. Santos thought for a moment, then shrugged. "Probably. I designed them to take a beating, and these Kethvor weapons are powerful, but not particularly sophisticated. We might see some shield degradation, but nothing critical." Captain Cole allowed himself a small smile. "Then let them fire. Let them see what happens when they throw everything they have at us." The Kethvor fleet unleashed hell. Space itself seemed to burn as thousands of weapons fired simultaneously. Plasma bolts, missiles, energy beams, a storm of destruction that would have annihilated any conventional fleet. It all converged on the ironclad, striking the small ship from every direction at once. The human vessel disappeared inside a ball of fire and explosions. For a moment, every Kethvor warrior believed they had won. For a moment, even Admiral Zintara felt his heart sink, thinking that the brave humans had finally been overwhelmed. Then the fire cleared. The ironclad hung motionless in space, its shields glowing brightly but completely intact. Not a single scratch marred its black hull. It had absorbed the combined firepower of nearly 300 warships and emerged without damage. On the devastation, Supreme Commander Vorthax felt something he had never experienced before in his entire life. True fear. And on the ironclad, Captain Marcus Cole straightened in his command chair and looked at his crew. "I think," he said quietly, "it is time to show them what humanity is capable of." The ironclad began to move. It did not accelerate slowly like other ships. It did not build up speed over time. One moment it was stationary, and the next it was a blur of motion, cutting through space faster than any vessel the Kethvor had ever encountered. It dove into the heart of the enemy fleet like a missile made of shadows. On the bridge, Captain Marcus Cole stood from his chair and walked forward to the main view screen. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency of professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. There was no panic, no fear, just focused determination. "Lieutenant Graves," Cole said, "activate all weapon systems, full combat mode." Amy Graves smiled grimly as she entered the command. "Full combat mode engaged, Captain. All 12 primary batteries online. Secondary weapons armed. Missile bays loaded and ready." The ironclad opened fire. What happened next would be remembered in the histories of 100 different species for thousands of years. The small black ship became a tornado of destruction, spinning and weaving through the Kethvor formation while unleashing weapons that seemed to come from nightmares. White beams of energy sliced through warships like they were made of paper. Missiles exploded with enough force to vaporize anything within kilometers. Even the point defense guns, designed to shoot down incoming projectiles, were powerful enough to tear holes in enemy hulls. Admiral Zintara watched from the safety of the Coalition command platform, his 4 hands pressed against the railing so hard that his knuckles had gone white. His translator struggled to find words for what he was seeing. The sensor displays were overwhelmed with data, explosions, energy readings, debris fields. Ships were dying so fast that the computer could barely keep count. 40 enemy ships destroyed, Commander Lyra reported, her voice shaking. 50, 60, they are falling like insects before a flame. The HFY tried to fight back. They were warriors, after all, bred for combat and trained from birth to show no fear. Their ships turned their weapons on the ironclad and fired with everything they had. Plasma bolts filled the space around the human vessel, so thick that it seemed impossible for anything to pass through without being hit. But the ironclad was never where the weapons expected it to be. It moved with a grace that seemed almost supernatural, sliding between plasma bolts, spinning away from missile swarms, always one step ahead of the HFY gunners. And every time it dodged, it fired back with perfect accuracy. On the devastation, Supreme Commander Vorthax screamed orders at his officers. His voice had lost its usual calm authority. There was desperation in it now, a raw edge of fear that his crew had never heard before. "Concentrate fire on their engines! Target their weapons! Someone tell me how to hurt this thing!" His tactical officer looked up with terror in his eyes. "Supreme Commander, we have hit them hundreds of times. Our weapons are having no effect. Their shields, they are beyond anything in our records. It is as if they are not even trying to avoid our fire." Because they were not. The ironclad had stopped bothering to evade most of the incoming attacks. Its shields were strong enough to simply absorb the damage while the ship focused on offense. It was a statement of contempt. A message that the HFY firepower meant nothing. 100 ships destroyed, 150. The debris field around the ironclad grew larger with every passing second, filled with the shattered remains of vessels that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. On the Valorian platform, the young censor officer Teth suddenly called out, "Admiral, I am detecting escape pods launching from several HFY vessels. Some of them are attempting to flee." Zintara could not believe what he was hearing. The HFY did not flee. They were taught from birth that retreat was the ultimate dishonor, worse than death itself. Yet here they were, abandoning their ships and running for their lives. The fear of one human vessel had broken the will of the most ruthless warriors in the galaxy. Captain Cole noticed the escape pods as well. He watched them on his display for a moment, then spoke quietly. "Lieutenant Graves, ignore the escape pods. Our fight is with their warships, not their lifeboats." Amy Graves nodded. "Understood, Captain. Focusing fire on combat vessels only." It was a mercy the HFY did not deserve and would never have shown to others. But humanity had decided long ago that there were lines they would not cross, even against enemies who showed no such restraint. The battle continued. 200 ships destroyed. The HFY flagship, the Devastation, tried to retreat, its massive engines pushing it away from the carnage. But the ironclad was faster. It cut through the remaining escort ships and positioned itself directly in the path of the fleeing command vessel. On the Devastation's bridge, Vorthax saw the human ship appear on his view screen and knew that his death had arrived. For a moment, the ancient warrior considered ordering one final charge, a suicide attack that would at least let him die with some honor. But as he looked around at his terrified crew, he realized that he could not ask them to throw their lives away for nothing. "Open a channel," he growled. "I will speak to their commander." The communication officer, trembling with fear, established the connection. After a moment, a human face appeared on the view screen. Captain Marcus Cole looked calm, almost peaceful, as if he had not just destroyed over 200 warships single-handedly. "Supreme Commander Vorthax," Cole said, "I am Captain Marcus Cole of the United Earth vessel Ironclad. You have two options. Surrender immediately and withdraw from this system or be destroyed. There will be no negotiation, no second chances. Choose now." Vorthax felt rage burn in his chest. He was a supreme commander of the HFY Dominion. He had never surrendered to anyone. The very idea was unthinkable. But he looked at the wreckage floating outside his viewport. 230 of his ships were gone. The remaining 70 were damaged, demoralized, and completely outmatched. If he continued to fight, they would all die, and the Dominion would lose not just a fleet, but a generation of warriors. "How?" Vorthax demanded, his voice rough with barely controlled fury. "How do you have this power? Where did you come from? We have never even heard of your species." Cole's expression did not change. "Humanity learned a long time ago that the universe is not kind. We nearly destroyed ourselves several times before we made it to the stars. We have seen what happens to species that are weak, that trust others to protect them. So we made sure that would never be us." He paused, and something hard appeared in his eyes. "We do not seek war, Supreme Commander. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. But we will never allow ourselves or our friends to be victims. You came here to destroy innocent people. You came here to murder billions. That ends now." Vorthax stared at the human for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his head. "We will withdraw," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "But this is not over, human. The Dominion will remember this day. We will find a way to destroy you." Cole shrugged slightly. "You are welcome to try, but I would not recommend it." The connection ended, and on the devastation, for the first time in the history of the HFY Dominion, a Supreme Commander ordered his fleet to retreat from battle. The battle was over. Admiral Zintara stood on the command platform of the Coalition station and stared at the view screen in stunned silence. Around him, his officers sat frozen at their stations, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The space where 300 HFY warships had gathered was now filled with debris, twisted metal, and shattered hulls drifting slowly through the darkness. Occasionally, a secondary explosion would flash in the distance as some piece of wreckage finally gave way. In the center of it all, the ironclad hung motionless, its black hull untouched by the battle that had raged around it. 11 minutes, Commander Lyra whispered. The entire battle lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes. That was all it had taken for a single human warship to destroy the largest HFY invasion fleet ever assembled. 230 vessels had been reduced to scrap. The remaining 70 had fled into hyperspace, running from a fight they could not win. Billions of Valorian lives had been saved by one ship and its crew of strangers. Zintara found his voice at last. "Open a channel to the ironclad." The communication was established, and Captain Marcus Cole's face appeared on the screen. He looked exactly as he had at the start of the battle, calm, composed, without a trace of sweat or stress on his features. It was as if he had done nothing more strenuous than taking a walk through a garden. "Admiral Zintara," Cole said with a slight nod, "the HFY have withdrawn. I do not believe they will return to this system anytime soon. Your people are safe." Zintara struggled to find the right words. In 200 cycles of life, he had never been at such a complete loss. "Captain Cole, I do not know how to thank you. You saved us. You saved 12 billion lives. And you did it alone, when no one else in the galaxy would even answer our call." Cole's expression softened slightly. "We heard your distress signal, and we came. That is what anyone should do when someone is in trouble." "But no one else did," Zintara said bitterly. "No one else was willing to risk the anger of the HFY. Only you." The human captain was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke carefully, choosing his words with obvious thought. "Admiral, I will tell you something about humanity. We have not always been good. We have made terrible mistakes in our history. We have hurt each other, destroyed our own world, come close to extinction more times than I can count. But we learned from those mistakes. We became better. He gestured at the view screen behind him, where the debris of the HFY fleet drifted silently. When we finally reached the stars, we discovered that the universe was full of predators, species that conquered and destroyed, that saw kindness as weakness and compassion as something to exploit. We could have become like them. We could have decided that the only way to survive was to become monsters ourselves. Cole shook his head slowly. We chose differently. We built ships like the Ironclad not because we wanted to conquer, but because we never wanted to stand by helplessly while innocent people died. The galaxy abandoned you today, Admiral. We did not. Zintara felt something warm spread through his chest. It was hope. Something he had thought was dead just an hour ago. Captain, where has humanity been all this time? Why have we never encountered your people before? We have been watching, Cole admitted, learning about the different species, their conflicts, their alliances. We wanted to understand the galaxy before we introduced ourselves. Today was supposed to be just another observation mission. A small smile crossed his face. Then we picked up your distress signal, and my crew agreed that watching was no longer acceptable. On the Ironclad's bridge, Lieutenant Amy Graves spoke up. Captain, I am detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching the system. Coalition identification codes. Zintara checked his own sensors and felt a flash of anger. Ships were indeed arriving. Vessels from species that had ignored the Coalition's desperate pleas for help. Now that the danger was over, they were coming to see what had happened, coming to make sure they were still on the winning side. It seems our neighbors have finally found their courage, Zintara said coldly. Cole observed the incoming ships on his display. It appears so. Admiral, I think it would be best if the Ironclad departed before your guests arrive. Humanity is not ready to announce itself to the entire galaxy just yet. You are leaving? The disappointment in Zintara's voice was clear. He had hoped to learn more about these humans, to perhaps begin a friendship that could reshape the future of the Coalition. For now, Cole said. But we will meet again, Admiral. I suspect this will not be the last time the HFY threaten your people. And when they return, so will we. He paused. In the meantime, I would ask that you keep our existence quiet, not secret. You may tell your leaders and your closest allies. But we would prefer if the wider galaxy did not learn about humanity just yet. Zintara nodded slowly. I understand. And I will honor your request, Captain. But I must ask, why help us? Why reveal yourselves at all? You could have stayed hidden and let us die. No one would have known. Captain Cole was silent for a long moment. Behind him, his crew had stopped their work and were listening to the conversation. Finally, the human captain spoke. Because staying hidden while innocent people died is not who we want to be. Because the galaxy needs to know that there is someone out there who will stand up to tyrants. And because... He smiled slightly. Because it was the right thing to do. The communication ended. On the view screen, Admiral Zintara watched as the Ironclad turned away from the debris field and accelerated toward the edge of the system. Its black hull seemed to absorb the starlight, making it look like a piece of darkness given form. In moments, it reached the jump point and vanished into hyperspace, leaving nothing behind but the wreckage of its enemies. Commander Lyra stepped up beside the Admiral. Do you think they will really come back? Zintara watched the empty space where the human ship had been. Yes, he said quietly. I believe they will. And I believe the galaxy is about to change in ways we cannot imagine. He thought about what the human captain had said, about watching, about waiting, about choosing to act when the moment demanded it. Humanity had revealed only a tiny fraction of their power today, and it had been enough to annihilate the most feared fleet in the galaxy. What else were they capable of? How many ships like the Ironclad did they have? What other weapons and technologies had they developed during their years of silent observation? These questions would keep Zintara awake for many nights to come. But underneath the uncertainty, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. The Kethvor Dominion would hear about this battle. They would learn that their fleet had been destroyed by a single unknown vessel. And they would be afraid. For the first time in their history, the conquerors would understand what it felt like to face a power greater than themselves. The galaxy had new guardians now. They came from a small blue world called Earth, and they had decided that the age of tyrants was coming to an end. Admiral Zintara looked up at the stars and, for the first time since the battle began, allowed himself to smile. The silence of space had never seemed so peaceful.